So now that we have what's happening in the cell down, okay, so we have our cardiac action potential and its various causes. The next thing we have to do is we have to put the take the cells together and put them together into an organ, right? All right, so cardiac cycle. We will probably start today and we'll finish this up tomorrow. Basics: 4 chambers, 4 valves, 2 atria, 2 ventricles, right? Flow of blood flow from the heart. Blood from the body enters the right atrium through the IVC or the SVC, inferior and superior vena cava. Okay, that blood, the right atrium pumps it barely through the tricuspid valve to the right ventricle. What I mean by barely, the atria are kind of pathetic in terms of how well they contract, which is not very well. So really all you get, the only kind of motion you get from the atria is just kind of a little, like it's just a little bump. That's all it is. It isn't a vigorous squeeze like the rest. So that little bump pumps that blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. Then the right ventricle contracts and pumps blood through the pulmonic valve. The pulmonic valve guards the entry to the lungs, guards the pulmonary artery. Blood flows through the lungs and back into the left atrium through the pulmonary veins. There's 4 of them, 4 pulmonary veins. Then the left atrium, same kind of thing, little bump, pumps blood through the mitral or bicuspid valve to the left ventricle. Left ventricle contracts, pushes blood out to the body. You should be very familiar with all of those points, okay, if you're not already. Okay, so if we sort of line this up in a series of pictures, okay, we're going to, here the heart is in diastole, okay, in other words, diastole is relaxation, systole is contraction. All right, so we start in relaxation. Step 1, when the cardiac cycle begins, the atria contract. So you can see this isn't a vigorous squeeze, it's just a little, right? So the atria contract, pushes a little bit more blood into the ventricles, okay? This is called atrial systole, when the atria are contracting. Normally, when we use the word systole and diastole, we're talking about the ventricles. If we specifically say atrial systole or atrial diastole, then we're talking about the atria, okay? So here we have atrial systole. Okay, once the atria have contracted, the next thing that occurs is, so atrial diastole begins, relaxation, ventricular systole begins. All right, so now the ventricles will start to contract. As soon as the ventricles start to contract, they tend to push blood flow backwards. That closes the valves, the AV valves. Okay, the ventricle continues to contract and eventually starts, the pressure inside the ventricle exceeds the pressure in the aorta and in the pulmonary artery, and blood starts to leave the heart. So in this first phase, we call that isovolumetric contraction. All right, so the isovolume, the volume isn't changing, but the heart is contracting. So what does that mean? Pressure is increasing, right? We're pressurizing the heart. Once the valves open, then we enter the second part of ventricular systole, which is ejection. Now is when the heart's doing its job. The only time in this whole place, the only job the heart has is to push blood forward. The only time it's doing that job is during ventricular ejection, okay? Now, once ejection has occurred, then the heart starts to relax. That's ventricular diastole. As that occurs, as diastole occurs, first the valves all close and we have isovolumetric relaxation. Then once the heart has depressurized, then the AV valves can open again and we'll get filling and go around the circle.